have the pleasure of welcoming Jason Kelly, General Manager of the IBM Global Blockchain Services Group. Jason partners with client organizations and consortia to unleash the exponential business value of blockchain technologies and reinvent business processes. Prior to this role, Jason led IBM Global Business Services Solutions, Design and Innovation. Jason also served as IBM CTO and design leader for IBM Business Process Outsourcing, and previously managed IBM's analytics business in North America, China, and Asia Pacific. Welcome, Jason, and please introduce your panel. It's a great pleasure to have you on board.
Well, thank you, and thanks to everyone joining here virtually. And with that introduction, I apologize. You could have started the introduction before I started work through my technical glitches, and it would have timed out. So thank you so much for everyone being on here with us today virtually at a time of many challenges. And I'm very excited today to have with us both Mark and Lisa, people who have been pioneering, if I can go that far as to say, some of the ways to address the challenges that we're seeing in today's environment and the challenges that we're seeing in such a brittle supply chain. So with that, we have Mark Treshock, who's been leading in the healthcare life sciences space in IBM for blockchain, and Lisa is joining us from the Worldwide Supply Chain Federation, leading more than 2,000 suppliers as they addressed the capabilities of the supply chain and bringing suppliers and buyers together. With that, let me just jump right into the topic that we're talking about, and this response that the world has taken toward COVID-19 and the pandemic that we're all still experiencing. In some cases, experienced yet another expansion of that challenge. We all know that the current supply chain has always been a challenge, meaning we've searched for elasticity. We've seen challenges in transparency, one up, one down visibility, and now in the current environment, that supply chain that was already brittle has broken. And we're looking at ways then to say, how do we address this challenge now and as we go forward post-pandemic? And with that, I want to pass it then to Mark Treshock to talk about some of the exciting things that he and the team in healthcare life sciences and blockchain are bringing to bear in the market immediately. So with that, let me pass it on to you, Mark.
Thank you, Jason, and thank you to everyone who's joining us today. Let me bring up some slides and I'll talk to you about what we call IBM Rapid Supplier Connect. So the genesis of this idea, the problem that we were trying to solve, is that early on in the course of the pandemic, we were speaking with procurement organizations in healthcare providers, so think hospitals and other care facilities, and they were expressing frustration, that they couldn't get many of the emergency medical supplies that they needed. They were running out of PPE, out of hand sanitizer, and other critical things. At the same time, we were speaking to other companies in the US and all over the world in other industries that were pivoting their supply chains, their manufacturing processes to help address some of these shortages. So this is everything from Ford Motor Company and General Motors and Dyson Vacuum making ventilators, to apparel companies making PPE, and even craft breweries making hand sanitizer. And that's an incredible story and a testament, to our entrepreneurial spirit, but that itself created another problem on its own. Back to this procurement director in the hospital, the challenge they were then having is how to connect to these alternative suppliers, and then B, how to determine, if they're real and legitimate. So to put a fine point on it, how would a procurement director in a hospital in New Hampshire connect with a craft brewery in California to buy hand sanitizer? And that was the genesis of what we call Rapid Supplier Connect. And the intent of this was very straightforward. And you could see it here on this slide. It's to create a single source of truth for information about suppliers, and then combine that with a marketplace So buyers, which are hospitals and care facilities, and now as we return to the workplace, any large company, so buyers can meet non-traditional suppliers and see what inventory they have on offer, right? To close the gap between a critical need and something that a hospital has, that they have available to them. So how does this work? What are the components to it? So from the supplier side, this starts with suppliers creating, think of it as a digital passport in the Rapid Supplier Connect platform. And that includes typical information that any supplier would have to provide to a procurement organization. So financial information, ownership information, a DUNS number, a Dun & Bradstreet number, attestations of compliance. This is all recorded in this digital profile, and it's recorded immutably on blockchain. It's recorded immutably on blockchain. Suppliers can then select which of the 15 categories of emergency medical supplies they support. Because this is focused, it's laser focused on the COVID emergency, there are 15 categories of thing, right, which in general we're in shortage, and that's specifically what the platform supports. So they select what categories they support, and then suppliers upload the inventory that they have available on offer. And they do that either through EDI, if they're a larger supplier, or a CSV file if they're a smaller company. And we encourage them to do that frequently. Now flip this around from the perspective of a buyer. Buyers can come into this platform after they sign up. They have then this single marketplace, the single place to meet these non-traditional suppliers. They could search for the categories that they need. If I need PPE versus hand sanitizer, for example, and then they could see the inventory that's available. Now, if a buyer wants to learn more about a supplier, right, to see that profile information, they request a connection with them through the platform, very much as you would request to join someone's LinkedIn network. So a buyer requests to connect with a supplier agrees, they then have access to that detailed financial and background information about a supplier. And again, all of this has been recorded immutably on blockchain, so the buyer has absolute confidence that they are seeing what the supplier loaded and what they intended them to see. Think of this almost as a college application where you can, upload your transcript once, and then any college or school you want to go to can access it, and they know that they are seeing the authentic thing. Right now, in designing this, we got this to market in just over 3 weeks. And one of the reasons we were able to do that is because we kept the focus very tight. So once buyers and suppliers meet each other and establish this relationship, they actually transact off of the platform itself. They will transact through any B2B or procure-to-pay network that they're both already a part of, like Ariba and Copa are 2 examples of that, but there are others, or they transact through some other means. This is really meant to be laser focused on connecting buyers and suppliers, establishing this trust, and helping close the gap between need and have. Now, to double click a little bit into the technology, again, we talked about some of the technology that supports this. And the reason we were able to get this up and running so quickly is that IBM leveraged existing platforms, right, that already perform these functions. So the piece around supplier identity is based on Trust Your Supplier, which is an existing platform that IBM and others are part of for procurement professionals. It helps create, again, a trusted place for suppliers to upload these documents about themselves, to establish their identity. They only have to do that once, and then they are able to share that with with buyers who are interested in transacting with them. And again, this is a process that typically takes weeks, if not months, as buyers vet suppliers to determine the suitability for the business relationship. In the case of this COVID emergency, we simply didn't have time. Buyers simply don't have time to do that. The other component of this is a platform called Sterling Inventory Visibility. That is another cloud-based application that allows, again, these suppliers to upload inventory visibility, the inventory they have on offer in real time or near real time, right? And that's a critical piece to expose to buyers specifically what's available. And then lastly, because this is meant to be, something that is, again, being assembled to fill an urgent need, right? We have a team of IBMers who support this, right? Helping buyers and suppliers on board, right? And get on board to the platform, and in some cases facilitating those connections. So Jason, that's a quick overview of the platform. Is there anything else specifically, you think we should touch on?
Well, I think that's a great intro, with this thought of, here was this challenge, and what I heard here was, with that immediate challenge, it wasn't like the challenge was going to slow down, and so quickly you and the team at IBM took some existing capability, a world-class blockchain platform that is going already cross-industry, so something that is scalable. And then you brought in what is a inventory visibility capability with your Sterling piece. And so now you have inventory visibility, you have a scalable blockchain platform and blockchain applications that are already working in the supply chain globally. You put that together and create it, for lack of a better, a buyer, supplier, have and need matchmaking service on steroids is
That's
what
exactly
I hear.
Right.
And so with that, you took some things that were existing, which then leads me into the question for Lisa. And Lisa Morales-Hellebu, who is our wonderful leader for the Worldwide Supply Chain Federation, she has an existing organization that plays in that space. If you have created this sandbox for this matchmaking, she already has a portion of that sandbox, if you will. So Lisa, maybe tell us a little bit about what your experience and how you have been able to team with the work that Mark Treshock and the team at IBM are doing.
Sure thing. Let me share my screen. Can you hear me okay?
Sure can. Hear you loud and clear.
Fantastic. So I am a co-founder of an organization called the Worldwide Supply Chain Federation. We were founded in 2017, and our mission is to build the world's largest grassroots community of people obsessed with supply chain technology and innovation. And here's how far we've gotten since 2017. We have monthly events. We are a community hosting events around the world, 36 so far to date, 6+ chapters in development this year around the world. We have chapters established in New York, which was our founding chapter, and Charleston, South Carolina. Over 125 people average our attendance on each event, and some events upwards of 400. Again, remind you, this is all bootstrapped, so it's just pure enthusiasm and the best and brightest of the world in supply chain coming together. And that total global membership is now currently up to 3,333 global members. Our membership really is equally split amongst buyers and builders. We like to call them that, the startups and the enterprise organizations. And our attendees and members also are equally split, with about 50% of our membership being executive management to C-suite on either side. Whether you're in a C-suite executive at an early stage startup building the best of supply chain innovation, or you're a C-suite executive at a major enterprise Fortune 500. Our community really is engaged, and we pride ourselves in building this needed space where supply chain executives and innovators come together to have a dialogue. We don't really have events that are passive. As you can see, this is one of our attendees in the background challenging one of the speakers. We're really the space where you can have those meaningful conversations. Organizations like Maersk have been supporting us since early on in our events. They not only attend, but we've worked with them to actually curate their demo day for about 60 of their top partners. So this is our reach. We really are about creating the much needed space for supply chain to collaborate. When everyone jumped into action around this coronavirus pandemic and supply chain crisis, it was around March 20th. And instead of just following the charge to rapidly moving supplies, we recognized that we needed to activate our global community to help us address the second crisis, the unemployment rate resulting of this pandemic. And those numbers, I mean, should be staggering to everyone. So we realized, again, everyone is working on getting PPE to essential workers. But as Mark touched on, there were too many suppliers and buyers trying to purchase from each other, driving up costs, increasing fraud, and even hoarding, and in some cases, piracy. Literally landed product being stolen by other organizations. So globalized supply chains are at increasing risk. This pushed us to recognize that the work we had been doing with our community around localization was an imperative given this crisis. So we focused on made in the USA supply chain. Traditional procurement processes look something like this. And this one specifically, if we're talking about RFPs, it's usually government. Governments put out an RFP, they get bids, and eventually, after months, they award a PO. And that goes to one winner of the bid, and it creates local jobs in that region. But again, Mark and Jason were talking about the brittleness of this current supply chain. It really is time-consuming, linear, and really needs to adapt to the agile environment we're currently in. So why am I showing you a starfish and a spider? I don't know if you read the book, but I love the book. The link is below, The Starfish and the Spider, The Unstoppable Power of Leaderless Organizations. This really, the visual connotes the differences between the different types of systems. And really, spiders represent a centralized system, which is what most companies and enterprise organizations are structured as. It works in certain contexts, but a starfish inherently is more resilient. Spider, you cut off the head, it dies. Starfish, you cut off a leg and it simply grows a new starfish. So when you're thinking about that in the context of systems, this is what they map to. Centralized being your spider, top-down, linear, decentralized being your starfish. They're resilient, self-propagating, and agile, but they lack any authentication. So distributed, being a starfish, now with authentication layered on top, gives you an entirely new type of resiliency and speed and efficiency for your systems and your supply chain, which can be applied not only to blockchain, but also to physical infrastructure. And that's what we've been working on top of collaborating with Rapid Supplier Connect, creating a physical manifestation of a distributed collaborative network. Here, made in the USA. We have FDA certified manufacturers. They're connected via shared data layer. So it gives those government contractors an instant access to a network of verified factories. Why is this important? Most of these factories can only create, say, 100,000 units of isolation gowns a month. If we have an order for, 50 million, we need to think about how we can spread that order over a network of factories that can all produce to the same standard, same certifications, and have the same criteria. So we've built that physical infrastructure and layered it on top of the blockchain infrastructure. This is what we're all about. We believe job creation, economic stability, and national security should be a priority. That's what we've been doing. Thank you, Jason. Any
Lisa,
questions?
that is wonderful, and I like the connection here that you've made when we talk about this thought of what Mark said in Rapid Supplier Connect, and when we think about the starfish and spider example. I must tell you, I really like, and the visual says everything, and you talked about this thought of layering, taking a blockchain capability, and anyone on the phone doesn't have to understand what blockchain means. All they need to understand is that here's this way to now share data in your your last slide, this starfish type of view, is that they're sharing it, it's secure, and there is a network of networks and not just a spider type of arrangement. In the spider arrangement, and this is where I've got a question coming at the end of this, because at the spider arrangement, you could see that view of people, entities that could almost see where they wanted to maybe talk or trade because they're at the end of either leg or what you will with the spider, but they can't get there from here. And so when I start thinking of your thousands of legs, and Mark, what you have done, you know, there must be some really good lessons learned in trying to stand this up quickly, because that feat of being able to go more than one up and one down in the supply chain, and those disparate legs, bringing them together in one network so quickly. I'll pass it first. I'll go last in, first out kind of thing. So Lisa, what were some of the key lessons that you have learned in your team there at the Worldwide Supply Chain Federation?
Wow, well, you got to listen to your customers and the actual users on the buy side and the supply side. We've had so many learnings just over the past couple of months, assuming that, you know, a simple marketplace, once you have vetted buyers and sellers on the front end, that could be searchable and everyone can be authenticated and have access to the marketplace and then just put in their POs. It's far more complex than that. There's a lot of hand-holding, education, because for the first time ever, hospitals have to relearn how to procure. They've usually inherited their procurement processes, their partners and suppliers, you know, 20, 30 years back. So, oh my God, our supplier is no longer viable this month. We need to start from scratch. So those people are adding layers of buyers on top of their existing procurement teams. Those people are trying to figure out the landscape, who's real, who's not. All of these layers is just adding complexity and confusion. So to actually be the arbiter of truth, you need to educate a lot on both sides of the table. You know, what's the difference between a spot buy? You're saying you desperately need nitrile gloves by next week and you need millions of them. Okay, you're going to be paying spot buy pricing. There's no gloves sitting there anywhere in the world waiting for your order. They are all spoken for. So if you can get in on a spot buy, that means an order fell through, and now the supplier holding that large volume knows that they can price gouge, you know, put it out to the highest bidder. So you're going to be paying a premium for that. Now, to educate them on production orders means that you have actually planned through your needs as a buyer, and you can predict how much you're going to need over the next month, 2 months, and place a volume order for a production run, which usually means it's 2 to 3, maybe 4 weeks out before that you get into the production order with that manufacturer. You get better pricing, far better pricing. You get better guarantee that you'll actually get what you're looking to buy, because we have all the certifications on our manufacturers, and we can more tightly guarantee a turnaround time. So spot buy, really expensive. You can get volume, but you're sort of putting all your chips on winning the lottery versus production. And then there's inventory. Everyone is looking for inventory that manufacturers are willing to pay for, put out for SMBs to buy, because SMBs are getting locked out of the volume market, the better pricing. So those who can put out actual inventory below retail, but even a little above wholesale, and have fixed available inventory for SMB smaller orders, you know, I need 500 isolation gowns for a medical clinic. Good luck getting on a production order with that volume. So there's a real split in the market, and you have to be agile to address it.
So I'm hearing, Lisa, a couple of things. Is that an education based on this new way to interact? And if I could ever make it real, an intelligent supply chain is really becoming more intelligent because of the nature of the current environment. Things that were just assumed easy to be done, now with more flexibility comes a need to be better educated And then also with this flexibility and the capability, I think, and coming to you, Mark, I think maybe this is where blockchain is adding some capabilities. When we think of these smaller buys that perhaps would not have been able to enter into the market, now if they're educated, or if there's a way for them to bring themselves together with visibility, combine some of those buys, they can now consolidate that and participate in the market. So there's also a market inclusion capability here. And I don't want to get too broad or theoretical, but when I start thinking about that job capability, when you're saying, how do we keep people employed? How do we keep maybe some of these smaller players in the market? This market inclusion, it goes beyond just the thought of the pandemic. It's how do we keep people in business and keep the smaller, medium-sized businesses productive? So that's very, very interesting as you say that, Lisa, because then now to you, Mark, I think somewhere in there, it's why blockchain. I think somewhere in there, you can tell me why can't we just do these things with what already exists?
Yeah, and that's absolutely correct. The market inclusion aspect of this is tremendous. And why blockchain? It's because in the supply chain that we're looking at in the post-pandemic world, trust really completely almost collapsed in the system. Buyers were having to go to non-traditional suppliers, right? They were making types of buys that they weren't familiar with, right? They had to relearn a lot of these skills. And blockchain provided the cornerstone of establishing trust within the network. And that's what was so critical, that there needed to be some basis of trust in the system, some tiny fragment of trust as a cornerstone for the process, for the network to begin to reboot itself, to begin to reinstantiate itself. And that's why blockchain was so critical for this application.
I think you're muted, Jason.
We can't hear you.
You can't hear me, and I said some brilliant things there. So Mark, to build on top of that, where does it go then? Where does it go from there? You said what's next. So what is next? What after we've seen the other side of the COVID-19 pandemic? What's next? What happens with Rapid Supplier Connect?
Yeah, no, one of the things that we learned from this is that we thought this would be the desire for this would be exclusive to the medical supply space. But what we found was over the past few months, other industries that were also impacted by the pandemic wanted to either join Rapid or have their own version of it, right? An example of that is the food industry, where we continue to see tremendous disruptions in the supply and demand of food, the accessibility of food in the US and other parts of the world, right? And it's for similar reasons, in that the traditional supply chain collapsed and a new one was trying to be rebuilt, and it needed trust as the cornerstone. So what we envision is that this capability will serve as the basis for a deeper, let's say, resilient supply chain in healthcare itself, but then also for a template that could be followed or rolled out in other industries. And that, that could be the silver lining in this, is that a year from now, the supply chains that we will see will be much more resilient, much more starfish than spider, and therefore much stronger and able to deal with crises in the future.
I hear this, and I think if I combine both, Lisa, what you have, and then Mark, what the team has been able to pull together with you, and in life sciences, healthcare life sciences, this is cross-industry capability. It's really supply chain is what we're talking about. I'm hearing innovation that was there and has been accelerated based on a crisis, and now has an opportunity to maybe reach some of this golden fleece that we've been running after, that starfish, this thought of actually having platforms with some interoperability, a network of networks. So as we close out this portion and we open up for some Q&As, because I know there have been some chat questions, Mark, how would someone sign up for Rapid Supplier Connect?
Yes, absolutely. So let me bring up a quick slide on that. First, while I find that Rapid Supplier Connect is available without cost until until the end of August, right? So through August, it's free to use for buyers and suppliers. And signing up is simple, right? There's a link. It simply takes you to a website. If you're a supplier, there's one process that you follow. It takes about 30 minutes to provide the information, and then roughly a day or two to have that information confirmed and to get onto the platform. For a buyer, it's a simpler process, but one that's takes a similar amount of time. Right, either follow this link or Google for IBM Rapid Supplier Connect, and you'll be taken to it. And again, we encourage anyone who feels they have the need for this to try to sign up and to.
All right. Well, great. And also great pricing up until August. So good to hear. It sounds like feel like a late night commercial pitch person right now. So good to hear that, and knowing that the two of you are working together, that it's already up and running. And I understand there's now 100 plus buyers and suppliers in the network. So join the excitement team as you're listening to this. Can join. And then, as I then move to Q&A, I will pass back to Radhika, because she is a brilliant author of a blockchain for the enterprise book. And I know this is this underlying topic here, the bright, shiny B word, blockchain, but this thought of using data differently. So I'm sure there'll be some questions about that as well. So Radhika, back to you, if I can, so we can just run through a couple Q&A.
Sure. Thanks, Jason. That was excellent. And I think there were some really great key takeaways for me personally, just listening to the conversation. We're talking about redefining trust. We're talking about data sharing. We're talking about greater visibility and transparency. We're talking about the matchmaking between the needs and the needs and the givers. What would the other side?
Needs and have.
There. Needs and have. Thank you. So that was really great. And and I think from the broader conversation on inclusion, I think you couldn't have hit a more important question on that, because at TI, we're really talking about convergence, not just convergence of technologies, but convergence in many, many different ways. And so when you think about the global landscape, Lisa, you were pointing that out, I look at that global landscape and I think about how are we going to bring total global ecosystem convergence, right? How can we make sure that no entity is left behind, so that it's really about not just the needs and the haves, but it's also about bringing communities together, making sure we're not leaving people behind, making sure that small and medium-sized businesses can participate in that market inclusive kind of framework, Jason, that you were talking about. So my question to you, we started to touch a little bit about this in terms of how we can apply this cross industry. So not just in terms of PPE equipment, which I think is a very relevant topic. We're all thinking about how we can improve the processes so that we can make these systems much more efficient and get the equipment to people that actually need to use them, not necessarily just to the highest bidder. What examples can you think of cross industries where post-COVID, we're really looking beyond this conversation of just COVID, PPE equipment, et cetera?
Ooh, can I take this first?
if we can, please. I was going to say, Lisa, go ahead. I'll jump in after you.
Thank you. So we were also, like IBM, able to move so quickly because we have a massive global network, and we've been working towards building out a localization supply chain strategy for about 5 years. And so this happened to hit, and we were able to activate it really quickly. But this was initially modeled to work with fashion and to create a localized made in the USA apparel supply chain that is sustainable, circular, transparent, and agile. So fashion is a no-brainer. PPE happens to take a jump start because that's what's needed to keep these fashion production factories still afloat during COVID. The conversations we've had with these factory owners that have been in business for 100 years, their family, there's been tears shed when we talk to the owners saying, thank you for caring about us and helping us have a lifeline during this crisis. So for me, it's fashion will be fast follower right after COVID. And then moving into food supply chains. Healthcare obviously is a massive beast with lots of regulation. Some of the things that I think will make fashion the easiest amongst healthcare, food, pharma, et cetera, is that it really doesn't have the levels of regulation that any of those other spaces do. And it has the least amount of innovation, really. We are talking about humans, slave labor, and children in other third world countries sewing every garment that we put on our bodies. We're now looking at ways to restore to make it financially viable, not only viable, but even more profitable than having a globalized supply chain, because you can actually control all the variables and have all of your environmental impact also recorded on the blockchain.
Great. Unfortunately, I think we're running out of time. So I'd love to continue the discussion, but I think we're running out of time. So we'll have to close this out. But Jason, Mark, and Lisa, really want to thank you three for illuminating on this subject and talking about a broader application than just PPE equipment post-COVID. I think we all can think about these things. So thank you all. We're going to be moving into the next session, which is about tech solutions for COVID from the healthcare perspective. So thank you again and wish you all a great day.